Hej, kära isländska bröder och systrar. Welcome to this video regarding the possible consequences of an EU membership. My name is Ulf Ström. I'm a Swedish sea captain, but also active in the Swedish People's Movement No to EU, and where I also serve as chairman of the Swexit party here in Sweden. In this video, I would like to share with you some of Sweden's experiences from more than 30 years of membership in the European Union, i.e. the realities we faced after the Swedish referendum in 1994. What we voted for was increased trade and increased influence in Europe, i.e. to be able to sit around the table and participate in the decision making instead of standing on the side as a spectator only. What we got was an invisible influence and a shrinking trade, from 62% of our export to EU in 1994, the year before we joined the EU, to 51% to EU today. We are some 10 million people in Sweden, which gives us 21 out of 720 seats in the EU Parliament, which corresponds to 2.9% of the votes. In practice, it means that we have 2.9% influence over how, for instance, French farmers grow their olives. But it also means the reverse, that the EU has roughly 97% influence over how, for instance, Swedish farmers milk their cows. In reality, it's even worse, because those 21 seats, they are spread over 8 different political parties. Parties pulling in different directions on different issues, and sometimes even against one another. Our largest Swedish party is the Social Democrats. They have 5 seats down there, which corresponds to 0.7%. Which brings us to the first quiz question of this video. How much influence do you get with 0.7% of the votes? Now, let's compare that with the Icelandic conditions. If you were about to join EU, you would most likely get 6 seats in the European Parliament, the minimum allocation for any member state as it stands for now, giving you 0.8% influence, but which also then means that EU gets 99.2% influence over how, for instance, your fishing fleets catch your fish. I will come back to that later on. When I'm asked about how the decision-making machinery works in Brussels, I usually describe it as a housing association. A husfälla, which I have named Husfälla Sultukrotka, with 27 members. In the upper flats live the North Europeans, and in the lower flats live the South Europeans. And this association works exactly as any housing association out there, but with one exception. In this association, it's the board which have the decision power over the members and not the other way around, which is the usual style. Anyhow, one day when you are sitting in your flat, the doorbell rings. You open the entrance door and see the entire association board standing out in the stairwell with serious expressions on their faces. And they tell you that they have a problem with the members living in the lower flats. We are talking about our Italian neighbors, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Greeks. They have partied up all their money so that they are unable to pay the monthly membership fee. So we in the board, we have now decided that it's now going to be paid by you instead. Yep. And by the way, While you are doing that, please make sure that you also provide them with a fully charged credit card so that they will be able to continue the party down there. And this was more or less exactly what happened in 2004 when the Eastern countries joined EU, and EU changed the shape from a trading union to a transfer union. This meant in practice that our countries up here in the north became contributors to the since many years mismanaged countries in the east and in the south, but in such a smart way that all countries, even we in Sweden, became receivers of contributions. We became contributors to ourselves, so to say. The way it works is that for every Swedish crown we today receive in contribution from EU, we have already paid 3 crowns to the EU in advance, i.e. we only get a third back. Sweden pays correspondingly 650 billion Icelandic crowns in a membership fee per year to EU and get approximately 200 billion Icelandic crowns back in contributions. And it's reasonable to believe that Iceland would face the same conditions. But now you might ask, if we pay 3 crowns but only get 1 back, what happens to those 2 crowns which appears to disappear in the meantime? Well, it's those 2 crowns which are distributed as contributions to the mismanaged economies in the southern and eastern part of Europe. And 2 countries which are interesting to compare with is Greece and Hungary. 2 countries which also have 10 million inhabitants each. For every crown they pay in a membership fee, they get 3 back in contribution. So that is the way it works. I'm sure you get the maths here. The largest spending item in the EU budget is agricultural and regional subsidies. 38% of the entire EU budget is distributed as grants, largely to unprofitable agricultural sectors, particularly in southern and eastern Europe. This has, in turn, undermined the Swedish agricultural industry. As a result, 35,000 farms have disappeared since Sweden joined the European Union. 9 out of every 10 farms have vanished. That in turn has affected our ability to feed ourselves. If Sweden's borders were closed today, this country would have food supplies for only 10 days. But that's not all. Over the years, we have been subjected to an endless stream of regulations which have harmed Sweden. Working time regulations that have led emergency personnel across the country to resign from their jobs. Skyrocketing electricity prices caused by the fourth energy package, which requires Sweden to make 70% of its electricity transmission capacity available to the rest of Europe. Which means that we are forced to pay German prices for originally very cheap and green electricity. It has now gone so far that regulations determine who is allowed to service a heating boiler, and even what type of surface should be used on a football pitch. From being one of the fastest growing economies in Europe, we now have the lowest growth rate in the EU. Despite being one of the largest net contributors per capita, we are among those who have the least influence. From having control of our borders and being among the safest countries in Europe, we now suffer from some of the highest levels of crime. And in order to understand